Fanning the flame. Rose, when she noticed the title for the sermon, she asked me last night, she's like, who is Fan? Like, is that a person? You know, she's thinking, is that a name, or what's Fan the Flame? And so I had to do a little explanation there, and then I told her you just have to wait for part of it. I never want to give too many of my secrets away too soon. Fan the flame. What about you then this morning? What about me? Are you, as the outline, the handout, the screen hopefully will say, are you on fire? On fire. I'm not asking what it feels like to go outside. You know, when it's 100 degrees every day, you kind of have to find a way to work that into the sermon at least once, right? But are you, as far as your heart goes today, are you on fire? Now, last Sunday, I asked you to raise your hand if you were afraid of being buried alive. Well, today, I'm not asking you to raise your hand. I'm just asking, are you lazy? It's been said that laziness may have invented more things than anything else. Because all of us, we have this usually subconscious tendency where we want to make things easier. And we say things like, work smarter, not harder. It's a lot like the story of the old mountaineer and his wife. They're sitting in their cabin one cold night. They're sitting all wrapped up and staring at the warm, cozy fire. And she pipes up and says, hey, wake up. Why don't you go outside? I think it's raining. Go outside and check and see if it's raining. And the old mountaineer, in his lethargic, comfortable state, you know what he says? He says, why don't we call the dog in and see if he's wet or not? We like taking it easy. I saw a meme the other day that said, it's a meme that's based on this saying, this other saying, I'm not lazy, I just really like doing nothing. You see, we like to rest. And rest is good. It's a good gift from God. But if we're not careful, we might abuse that good gift and it turns into something else. It might be a time as a Christian or that my light, my flame is dwindling. I'm not as excited. I'm not as passionate. It might even be as I once was. That moment when I came up out of that watery grave and newness of life. Oh, what a day. But that was a few days ago for many of us. It's time this morning then for us to fan the flame of our hearts. Our hearts. We're not discussing a personality trait or the environment that we were raised in or any of those things this morning. Instead, we're discussing from Romans chapter 12, verse 11, a gauge, not the only gauge, mind you, but a gauge that God uses for what we treasure in our hearts. I'm convinced that unless we're blind to the beauties of a God who dies for his rebellious subjects, then it is for us, if we're not blind, to have hearts that are literally on fire. Okay, maybe not literally, but are on fire for Jesus. On that note, from this verse and a few supplemental verses, we have this morning the sloth, the stove, and the sleigh. The sleigh. Shall we take a gander at those? First of all, the sloth. Do y'all like my sloth? Now, if you want to remember this section of the sermon, You can either remember what's on the screen for your word picture if you're a visual person, or you can have a little fun with it and remember my precious memories lamb right here. Yeah, I have enough biological insight to get that. I mean, I'm not a zoologist or anything, but this is not a sloth, just so we're clear, okay? I had a sloth of sorts to bring this morning, and then, well, I did have a birthday last week. So the sloth is sitting at home, waiting for me to come home, I guess, this afternoon. I didn't have time when I realized it to run home or anything. So you're stuck with my lamb this morning, but that's your sloth, okay? Right there. Sloths get a bad rap, don't they? It goes back to a French biologist who in the 1700s said things like this, that sloths are lazy, in habitual pain. They're just not that intelligent. If they had one more thing wrong with them, they wouldn't even be able to exist. They would just go extinct. They're just that defective as a creature. And over the years, many languages, it's not just the English language, have allowed that to influence so that when we refer to someone being lazy or at least being a little on the slow side, we call them slothful, or we might just say, you're acting like a sloth. Now, the one piece that is accurate is that sloths are the slowest moving animal or creature known to man. Now, there's a biological reason for that. It has to do with their metabolism and some more that's beyond this sermon. But they do get a bad rap. And so I don't want to, if you're a sloth fan, I don't want to push too far there, but we can still, because of our culture and our language, we can still use that as a device for our verse this morning. Even our English text uses the word slothful. Maybe we should read it. Let's read it together. Romans chapter 12, verse 11. Now in the middle of this paragraph of gospel trios, as Paul, through the Holy Spirit, encourages Christians to be people of love and care, people of generosity, he then writes this in Romans 12:11. Do not be slothful, there's the sloth, in zeal. And so you have the negative command, do not. There's a shall not here for you. And then you have the negative term itself, slothful. Here's someone that, if you use this word to describe someone, it's someone that they do this. What is that? You might call it shuffling, but I'm going to call it dragging my feet this morning. If you put this in the context of a Christian, it might be the Christian that is asked to teach a class. And although they might not actually drag their feet, it's like, okay, I guess I can come up with something and I'll teach the class for at least a few weeks. And I didn't plan this, Jason, okay? I see that look. You got to know some context for that. It's a sort of an inside joke if you were in the class over there this morning. I really didn't plan that. But we do that, don't we? Now, sometimes it's because of that 90-10 rule or 95-5 rule sometimes, and it's because we've been teaching a class every week for months and years. And there's something to be said for that it's possible to go to the extreme where you're so not slothful that you wear yourself out. Burnout is a real thing. But that's not the ideal here. The ideal is someone that, well, maybe it might be because of burnout, but for whatever reason, this is spiritual laziness. And a class is just one example, okay? Paul says don't be slothful, and then you get the positive term now in zeal. It's the term we find most often in the Bible in English as diligence. It refers to energy. So don't be hesitant or lazy. Don't drag your feet when it comes to how energetic you are. And in this context about Jesus, about loving people, about helping someone that has something broken that you can help repair in their life. Don't be that way, he said. This word zeal, if you do a little bit more research, it seems to go back to our hands, to a word for hands, because most of what we do, even today, when a lot of what we do is this on a keyboard, almost everything that we do involves our hands in some way. Some of us, if you tied our hands or kept them in their pockets, we couldn't talk. Isn't that right? We do so many things. So put that back in the verse. Paul says, don't be a person that drags your feet like a sloth when it comes to doing things, even, yes, with your hands, for Jesus. That might look like, just for recent sake, VBS prep, VBS other participants. It might look like helping with a pantry on a Friday night. I almost said Tuesday night. It might look like a lot of different things. Don't be a sloth, he says. If we were to go back a few verses to verse 8 of Romans 12, you might have noticed that on your handout. He's describing different gifts that people have. He focuses in, hones in on the leadership. That those who lead, let them lead with, same word, with zeal. Let them be passionate about it. Or, now, if you're going to lead in God's community, God's family, lead with passion. Don't be slothful. And then a couple of verses from the proverb writer. We'll have to look at these pretty quickly, but Proverbs 13, verse 4, and then Proverbs 18, verse 9. A couple of parallel statements of wisdom now on this idea of the sloth. Proverbs 13, verse 4, the soul. Now we're getting a look into the soul, into the psychological nature of what he calls here the sluggard. It's a word you'll find more than once in Proverbs. This person that likes to take it easy just a little too much. The sluggard. Craves. The problem is not that they don't have desires or things that they want to have and enjoy. Not always, at least. Craves and gets nothing. While the soul of the diligent, the zealous, that person, he says, is richly supplied. And then Proverbs 18, verse 9, looks at the results of this attitude of being slothful as a Christian or as any child of God, given this context. Proverbs 18, verse 9, whoever is slack in his work is a brother to him who destroys. You catch the subtle implication there? He doesn't say, okay, you're not the one that destroys, but your kin, you're his brother. Let's put that in our words and say that the person who is slothful in zeal is a person that will lead to disastrous results in the end. Therefore, Paul says, don't be a sloth in zeal. Let's keep reading. Let's go back to Romans chapter 12. Additionally, this morning we have the stove. Romans 12, verse 11 also says, be fervent in spirit. Or yours might have in the Spirit. The word fervent, it means to boil. Are we boiling today? It means when you put the stove or the saucepan on the stove, and see this one says Church of Christ, Second and Adams. I had to steal the saucepan, I had to steal the lamb. At least the third visual aid is mine. I didn't have to steal it. But it's when you put that saucepan with water or whatever it is, water might be the best example, and you turn it up to high, and you give it a minute or two, and then it boils. Then it might even boil over the stove. Would that be an accurate way to describe my life? I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel more like the saucepan that's been left on to boil too long. And then all the water evaporates, and what happens? Well, then it might ruin your saucepan. It's going to burn. Some of us might feel like that. We're just kind of crusty and burnt. And how often would these words be something we might even pray? Lord, revive my spirit. Light the fire. Fan the flame in my heart again. Lord, you know where I've been. You know that my spirit is willing, my body is weak. So light the fire in my heart again. It is 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 5 through verse 10. And I lost my clicker. There it is. Where we are called to make every effort, to be diligent, to make sure our calling and election is sure. And we even have a list of some things to get started on, then things to build into our lives. And then a final warning or two, along with a final encouragement in verses 8, 9, and 10. A good passage among many to contemplate as we read these few words, be fervent in spirit. As a people, as a society, you could look and say that there are moments, there are times in our lives where our passion for Jesus isn't burning so bright. We're not boiling for Jesus. And it's because we're too passionate about other things. You can ask that this morning. What really makes you excited? But we might also look at our society and say that it sometimes is not so much that we're passionate about something else other than Jesus and His Word. It's just it's like a cultural yawn. That we're just not really passionate about anything. We're not excited. We're just entertained. And if we're not being entertained, usually by a screen, then we're what? It's that terrible word. That word you don't say in our house. I'm bored. Go back to where we began. If I'm bored with Jesus, whether that's because it's the old, I've heard that before, or whatever it is, I might need to take a look at my eyes. I might be blind to what's there, really there. And I'm not talking about the preaching. Preacher might be bored. But this can't be. Not in reality. Be fervent, he says, in spirit. Then one more. Lastly, this morning, not just the sloth, not just the stove, but the slave. I've incorporated this into a sermon here before. It's not the same sermon, not even the same reason, but it was a little over 4 years ago, and I thought it had been long enough to bring it back out again. This was made and given to me by Jim Richardson, not long before he left this earth. But this morning, when you see this, I want you to think about the reason Paul writes the last part of Romans 12, verse 11. Let's read it. Romans 12:11. Do not be slothful in zeal, but instead be fervent in spirit. Serve the Lord. The Lord who died on the cross of Calvary. I use the word slave, and I know, that word has such a negative connotation to it, but I use it because that's the word Paul uses here. We don't like to translate it that way because it doesn't sit well. It unnerves us to say, work as slaves of the Lord. But that's the word when he says serve. He doesn't just say serve, though. For here, you might compare later in Romans where Paul uses the same word, the same phrase, type of phrase, serve, but it's not Jesus. It's our own appetite. That might get us on fire and excited. Whether it's actual hunger or it's something else that we have an urge for. Sexual greed. But Romans 12:11 says, I don't just want you to have enthusiasm. Because I can do that. I want you to be on fire to serve Jesus. Who died, according to Titus 2 verse 14, and I went too far. All right. Titus 2:14, who died for us to be a people who are, quote, zealous for good work. Because when I serve Jesus, I end up serving you. Now, it doesn't say serve others, and I might point out there, I'm going to serve other people, but I'm not serving them as if they're my master. We'd call that people please. He doesn't say serve a list of do better things and behave a certain way. There's a place for that. No. He says you serve Jesus. He's your master. So roll all that back. From the sloth to the stovetop to the slave. When we say, let's fan the flame of our hearts, that's what it really means. It means to be a Christian who looks at that cross and I can't help myself but have a passion that burns inside me. And it is not that I'm trying to somehow pay Jesus back as if he's a creditor. It is not that I feel guilty. Well, Jesus died for me, I better do something. No. It's something purer than that. It's that we serve a God who for some reason is so often pictured with fire. Because fire has its way of spreading. Fire has its own way of igniting anything that's flammable that gets close enough. So could it be that the key to teacher problems in the church, the key to getting people involved and doing more than just sitting on a pew on a Sunday morning in the church and just in their lives, could it be that the key to all of that is a heart that is ignited by getting close to Jesus? Fan the flame. We are going to sing an invitation song. We're supposed to, right? Today, could we think inward for a moment? As if we could take that mirror and put it right here and see, is there a glow reflected? Or just a little spark? Now that flame this morning being fanned, it might be that today is your day to join with Jesus. That's what it means to become a Christian. To be united with Jesus and to join His service as a Christian. What's my heart like today? Am I ready? When he comes back, will he find that my light has gone out? Or will he find a flame that's been fanned to burn bright? Did you know our word enthusiasm? We don't use it that way really today, but it goes back to a Greek word that means, the Greeks used it in a derogatory way because it was when someone was acting so crazy, they said all the gods have possessed them. It means God in or taking over you on the inside. Fan the flame as we stand together and sing.